participant. That's just me, the host. Doesn't say you're here yet.
That's what I've been doing since '92.
But it's amazing because you do that, and then you're out and you're speaking to CEOs and entrepreneurs and just people in general, helping them build their businesses and build their empires and really build wealth for future generations.
Hmm.
So, one of the things that I really loved is when I started reading The Wealth Choice is how we have to understand that even though the youth is 20% of our population, they're 100% of our future. And if we don't invest in them, nobody else will.
Agreed.
And the time that you devote to these young people is just, it's amazing. For a minute, I want to get into the book, but for a minute, what's the thought process or what's the mindset that you're feeling from our youth of today?
Oh man, there is so much positive energy, at least from my vantage point. Sure, I mean, you could look at all the flaws and the shortcomings and the overall traits and attributes of any generation and pick and probe. But the bottom line is, in this day and age, if you aren't moving forward, you're being left behind. And I can say on your program right now, we are moving forward. This generation is certainly more entrepreneurial. This generation, as we know, is certainly more tech savvy. This generation, as we know, questions, deep-seated beliefs that no one would question before. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a form of inquisition. So we're in good and capable hands. And like you said, until we go ahead and arm them with the traits, the keys, and the qualities of success, we're going to be short of the mark. And I told you when I was down in Florida, I always go back to the interview that I had with John Johnson of Ebony Magazine. And part and parcel of that, because at the time, he was the number one in terms of wealth creator business owner at the time. He was number one. And I singled him out for a number of selfish reasons because I could simply be able to say during my interviewing phase, well, who have you interviewed up to this point and blah, blah, blah. And I could say, well, I interviewed John Johnson, Ebony Magazine. They say, well, come on, man, you got me and the like. But the bottom line is when he told me that, number one, he said, you don't have to go around the country interviewing successful people, man. I mean, all you got to do is look at a relay race. And I said, what do you mean? He says a relay race isn't won or lost in how fast the runners are. A relay race is won or lost in how capable one runner hands a baton to the next. And that's what we have to look at. I mean, Velton, I'm a Johnny come lately. I didn't do anything magnificent with my life because, I mean, you holding up a copy of The Wealth Choice. In 1897, your most prolific scholar, W.B. Du Bois, wrote that seminal book called The Negro in Business. And the good news is he was a professor here at Atlanta University. And during the summer months, he got on a train and he traveled up and down the East Coast and he interviewed black entrepreneurs. They weren't called entrepreneurs back then, they were called business owners. And he took notes with both hands. He wrote a survey and surveyed these individuals. But that book is a thick book. That tome is a thick book. And there's only a handful, well, a little bit more than a handful, of university libraries that have a copy of that book.
Mm.
The Atlanta Exposition was founded to give that book widespread appeal and an audience. But he says he has two profound quotes within the first 30 pages of the book. Number one, the man or woman who won't control his or her finances won't control anything else. That's where we are right now. In other words, if you don't care about the money in your pocket, what do you care about, dropout rates of African American males, the number of black males incarcerated, teen pregnancy, HIV rates, lack of home ownership? And number two, nothing positive will ever occur in a community that fails to circulate its dollars. Now,
Mhm.
Velton, he wrote that in 1897. I mean, come on, man, 121 years ago. Why are we still fighting this fight? He told you what you needed to do in 1897. We didn't, I guess we didn't pick up the book. We didn't get the email. We didn't read the text message, but that's where we have to be concerned today.
It's interesting because one of the things that a lot of people talk about, they talk about Black Wall Street, and we're going back to the 1800s, early 1900s. And one of the things that I just realized, or I just found out in the last 5 to 7 years, is everybody attributes Black Wall Street to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what happened there. There were more than one.
Yeah,
There
Raleigh
were
Durham.
multiple
Mm-hmm.
Black Wall Street
Yep.
around the country that
St. Louis.
really
Yep.
they all met the same fate
Mm-hmm.
in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So the question when I picked up your book, and I'm going to put it up here again because I want everybody to see it. If you have not read this book, and I'm going to say this, and Doc, he knows I've said this before. This is a book that will change your mindset on the way you look at it, because it's not just the world according to Dr. Dennis Kimbro. It's the world according to the people that he spoke to and the information he was able to pull out of them about how they viewed wealth and our decision as it relates to wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you started writing this book, and like I said, I told him before we came on the air, I had pulled out a couple of things that I really wanted to kind of delve into today. The title, The Wealth Choice, means that we have a choice in what we do.
Oh, without a doubt.
And how we conduct our lives as it relates to business, as it relates to our finances, as it relates to our physical well-being and our spiritual well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I pulled out of here and I highlighted because it's near and dear to me, because these are two areas that I focus on, is number one, my daily routine as it relates to my physical well-being. And number two, my spiritual well-being as it relates to church habits and those types of things. Can you talk just a couple minutes about those two areas? And then I want to get into a little bit more, because you really get into smart money moves and the best way to get rich and so forth and so on in there. But all of these things have to do with our routine and how we think.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are 10 different forms of wealth, and Velton, money is only one of them. Money is number 3. People make the mistake to think that money is the only form of wealth, and it's not. Number one form of wealth is knowledge. And I tell my students all the time, the pocketbook can't grow till the mind grows. You will never develop wealth until you develop a wealth consciousness. But when you spoke about health, health is number 2. And it's not health, it's energy. You go ahead and you get a dream, but you lack the energy to pursue that dream. When you look at the average work week in the United States, it's 37.5 hours. But the average executive week, now you said CEO, the average executive work week is anywhere from 65 to 67 hours a week. But the average entrepreneurial work week buttresses up on 80 hours a week. As a matter of fact, some entrepreneurs, they never shut it down. They never turn the switch on. So how are you going to attain your goals and your objectives? It's going to take energy. It's going to take, in many cases, a maniac with a mission. You are on your mission to reach your goals and objectives. So energy is crucial. Like I said, the number 3 form of wealth is money, but the number 10 form of wealth is confidence and charisma. There's high and there's low, there's fast and slow energy, Velton. And all you got to do, there you are in South Florida, just when you're walking down the street, just conjure in your mind how the wealthy, how the peak performer, how the movers and shakers walk down the street. They walk down the street fast. Hey, man, I got to go, my brother. Hey, hit me on the hip, man. You got my email address. I promise you, we'll get together. I got to run. We'll kick it off, blah, blah, blah. Well, how do the poor, how do the hopeless, how do the downtrodden walk down the street? They shuffle their feet. Oh, man, I'm just, a squirrel in your world trying to find a nut, blah, blah, blah. Well, you quit boasting about the level of your poverty, all that you've got to do. And you got a choice, 50 million different choices that we can make on a daily basis, and 99.9% of them we don't have to address. But there are 2 choices that we must face as soon as our feet hit the ground in the morning. Number 1, you can accept the circumstances as they are, or number 2, you can take the responsibility to change them. And all the interviews that I had in that book, between my interviews and surveys, and over a 7-year period, I rubbed shoulders with minimum 1,000 black millionaires. They all took the latter approach. They decided to, excuse me, they all took the latter approach. They decided that they were going to make a conscious decision in their life.
Hmm. Amazing. It's interesting because what you just said leads me into kind of the second thing. I told him before we started the show. I said I don't normally read to adults, but there's sections of this book that are so powerful. I'm just going to read a little excerpt here, and you know exactly who said it. It says, "If it's riches that you seek, you will find critics and pessimists at every turn who
Yep.
will forecast your failure. These experts will point out that you can never build a business without sufficient capital in these times of intense competition. Moreover, you will encounter obstacles at every turn. Wealth attainment demands a stiff backbone, as well as plenty of grit to keep you pushing towards your goal. Nothing else will win." And you know who said that. But you talk about a millionaire, we're talking about Tyler Perry. He's a
Yeah.
self-made millionaire, a man who was sleeping in his car at one time.
Yep. And
Who's
there I,
now,
yeah, and there I am with Tyler Perry, and I asked him. I said, Tyler, how did you go from sleeping in your car in New Orleans and sleeping in your car in Atlanta, Georgia, to building a $145 million production studio? But his response was nothing but the grace of God. But what you just read right there is that all the people that we look up to, all the people that we're admired with, all the folks that, we want to emulate, all the celebrities, all the wealth creators, Velton, at one point in their life, they were ridiculed. At one point in their life, they were scoffed at. At one point in their life, people laughed at them. Well, what did they possess that everybody else did? Well, they had a burning desire. And a burning desire is unlike any other desire. Okay, my wife has a desire to get the house painted. She's choosing colors. She has a desire. She wants to get new area rugs and this and that. I have a desire, a couple of books I want to buy. We all got different desires. But a burning desire, Velton, is an inner candle, an inner flame that cannot be extinguished. And though the worst may go before you, though the critics come, the doubters come, the non-believers and the unbelievers, they will laugh, they will ridicule, and they will scoff at you. You will use their laughter, you will use their ridicule to propel yourself forward. That is the difference. I mean, we are all, when I say burning desire, find your burning desire. Come here, do what you've been sent here to do. I didn't choose to be here, and you didn't choose to be here. The bottom line, we were chosen. As the Bible says, you talk about the spiritual aspects of wealth creation and whatever, complete thy noble task. And what in the world does that mean? Do what you were sent here to do. Complete thy noble task. Go get a suit that fits. Update your resume. Go down there and fill out the application. Hell, you might get the job. Man, go ahead, send a cover letter, send a thank you letter. You might develop a relationship with somebody because your net worth will be a reflection of your network. Complete thy noble task.
Wow, it's amazing. And it's interesting because we talk about people's evolution. We talk about people who had nothing, who through their hard work and dedication gain access to capital and wealth and the ability to create a better life for themselves. One of the things I want you to touch on is another excerpt from the book, and it says the best educators are those who are always learning, forever absorbing information from every possible source and opportunity. We are in a world of immediate gratification and information, but sometimes there are, through the course of distraction, we would rather be entertained than educated. And I think from a CEO standpoint, we have to spend more of our time on the education mode and less in the entertainment sphere to really grow our businesses and to grow our empire or our wealth. Can you just spend a couple
Yeah,
minutes with
I,
that?
I share that with my student. It's called the E to E ratio, Velton. It's called education to entertainment, and you brought it up. If I walked out, here I am in Atlanta. If I walked on Peachtree Street and I grabbed a small sample of the average individual who lives in this country, it's probably 4 to 1. In other words, for every dollar that they spend, in education, reading a book, buying a library card, going to a conference, going to a seminar, they would spend about $4 entertainment, going to the club, having a couple of beers, seeing a movie, kicking with the friends. 4 to 1. But what is it in the black community, Velton? It's 10 to 1. For every dollar we spend, in our head, you know, reading the book, going to the seminars, going to the conferences, we spend $10, on entertainment. If we would only reverse that ratio, that would have a profound effect on our lives. The bigger the house, the more personal books they have in the library. But the smaller the house, the bigger the flat screen TV. Until we go ahead and change that narrative, change that paradigm, and look at ourselves as becoming lifelong learners. If you read, if you study, if you read, 30 minutes, 30 to 60 minutes a day, you do that for 3 years, you'll be known throughout your community. You do that for 5 years, you'll be known throughout the country. But if you read 30 to 60 minutes a day in the field of your choice, Velton, you do that for 7 years, you will draw world recognition. And all you got to do is look at my life as an example. It took me 7 years to write my first book, and that's all I did. Do I have recognition throughout my, neighborhood? Yes. Do I have it throughout the country? Yes. Do I have it nationwide? Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice has been translated into Chinese. I mean, yeah. So study, grow. I have a sign in my classroom that reads, if you don't read, if you don't study, if you don't grow, if you don't develop, if you don't go to the seminars, if you don't go to the conferences, if you don't take good notes, somebody out there in the universe will. And the day you meet that other person, you lose. This is an information-driven society. When Mark Zuckerberg came up with Facebook, when Chad Hurley came up with YouTube, when Reid Hoffman came up with LinkedIn, when Evan Spiegel came up with Snapchat, when Jack Dorsey came up with Twitter, when Elon Musk came up with PayPal, I mean, when Kevin Systrom came up with Instagram, they came up with these social media platforms, not for you to gossip. They came up with these social media platforms so some poor girl in Bangladesh could have adequate drinking water. So some poor child in Johannesburg, somebody can now get her a school uniform so she can get an elementary education. We have got to change the narrative.
It's interesting inside of our community, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I am a firm believer that one of the greatest things that ever happened to our community was desegregation. But one of the worst things that ever happened to our community was also desegregation, because we lost everything. And when I say we lost everything, it wasn't just that we lost the physical stores, shops, and things. We lost the mindset of turning over our dollars in our own community and being self-sufficient to build our own businesses, our own empires, and our own futures. And I know that you and I touched on that a little bit, but I'd like, from your perspective as a professor at one of our HBCUs, to talk about that for a minute, if you would. And what do you think about it?
Well, again, you hit the proverbial nail on the head. The average dollar stays in the Jewish community $19 before it leaves. The average dollar stays in the Asian community about 24 days before it leaves. The average dollar stays in the East Indian community about 45 days before it leaves. But the average dollar stays in the black community 6 hours before it leaves. Wow. So when you talk about circulating your dollars, and you're exactly right, we have given away entire industries. I mean, Velton, I had in terms of my research, Kansas City Royals baseball team brought me in to speak. And there I am with Buck O'Neill. Now, Buck O'Neill played in the Negro Leagues, and I sat at his feet for 3 or 4 hours, man. I asked him every question I could ask, and I was just pleased and blessed to be in his environment. But he told me that he played against Babe Ruth, and he played against Lou Gehrig, and he played against Joe DiMaggio. And I said, how in the world did you play against those guys? Because Jackie Robinson didn't integrate baseball until April 15th, 1947. He said, well, Doc, he said, during the winter months, we always barnstormed. The all-stars from the Negro Leagues would barnstorm against the all-stars from Major League Baseball, and we would play against them in Mexico and Cuba. And he went on to say, he said, I met Babe Ruth, and I met Lou Gehrig, and I met Ty Cobb, and I met, Joe DiMaggio. And he said those white ball players were all jealous of the Negro ball players. And I said, why in the world were they jealous of the Negro ball players? He said, because whatever city that we traveled in, black baseball players traveled in, and even white baseball players, during that time period, they always stayed at the best hotels and ate at the best restaurants and, were entertained at the best cabarets because they were all black owned. They said, I don't care if you went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, the best hotel in Tulsa, Oklahoma was black owned. I don't care if you went to Wichita Falls, the best hotel in Wichita Falls, St. Louis, Kansas City, Davenport, Iowa, they were all black owned.
Mm.
The best restaurants were all black owned. So these were entire industries. Yeah, we're not talking, okay, you can throw Madam C.J. Walker in the hair care industry. No, we are talking major industries that we gave away. Now, here's the good news. If you built it before, you can do it again. And that's not me. Go read Michael Porter, Competitive Advantage, and at that time that you had these wealth creators building these entire industries, race was not a competitive advantage. Oh yeah, we couldn't go into a white hotel, but we didn't build black hotels just, so blacks could, have a place to stay. No, we focused on excellence first. That's why blacks and whites both came there. When you are the best at what you do, you never have to worry about income, and you never have to worry about employment because the marketplace will seek you out. That's what we concentrated on.
Mm. Service excellence is so important in everything that we do. And unfortunately, in a lot of instances, that's the first thing that we sacrifice when difficulties happen. Service suffers. But what you're talking about here is not just service in the short run, but service that helps you build a reputation, build a legacy, and build a long-term customer base that's going to come back again and again and again. And as you said, if we did it once, we can do it again.
Yeah,
now,
you definitely have to have the mindset. And in terms of service, the formula for compensation is Q plus MA equals C. The quality of your service plus the quantity of your service plus the mental attitude in which it is rendered always equals compensation.
Wow.
I tell my students all the time, that guy standing on the street corner holding up that cardboard sign, I work for food, has the same advantage of Oprah Winfrey, same advantage of Bill Gates, same advantage of Steve Jobs. And they look at me and they roll their eyes and said, what in the world are you talking about? I said, because anybody can wow the customer. Anybody can do more than what is expected, more than what is required. Anybody can go the extra mile. The number one rule of marketing is make the eyeballs move. And the quickest way to make those eyeballs move is, provide service with a relish, add the extra added touch, add the splendor. And even in this day and age, you got a lot of businesses and enterprises that don't do that. I can tell you right now, the 4 or 5 industries with the absolute worst customer service. Number one is telecommunications. Go look at my cable bill, my cell phone bill. They're always messing up. Number two, banking. Look at Wells Fargo. How Wells Fargo is staying in business is beyond me. Is beyond me. Number 3 is hair care. I got 3 daughters and I got a wife. Well, my appointment was 11 o'clock. She didn't show up till 11:30. Your time is worth something.
Mhm.
So you want to go ahead and you want to, the quickest way for you to differentiate yourself is through your customer service.
Now, you guys who are watching this, I'm kind of jealous because I'm at a disadvantage. I'm interviewing, so I can't take notes. So I'm glad this is recorded because Q plus Q plus M. Hey, that's amazing stuff. Doc, we're in the fourth quarter of the year, and I'm reading another book, and I love this book. It's called The 12-Week Year,
hmm
and it's changing the way I'm looking at projections for my business. But one of the things that I really want you to take a few minutes and talk about is winding down the fourth quarter. Now, one of the other sections of your book, you interviewed Carla Harris, and she said at the beginning of each year, she lists her goals in two columns, one on the right, and she states the same person that she wants to be on the left. Then she lists the definitive goals, such as how to generate $50 million in revenue within a calendar year, and so forth and so on. When you talk about goal setting, and you talk about tying down the fourth quarter, but not just I don't want people to think that tying down the fourth quarter is the most important aspect, because the end of this year is the beginning of next year, and if we don't start looking at what we're going to do based on where we're going to end this year in the first quarter, when it gets here, it's too late. Can you spend a few minutes and just talk about that Carla Harris segment and your view from that standpoint?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you're talking the principles of management, planning, organization, and control. You got to set clear objectives of what you want to accomplish. I mean, there are four elements of strategy. Number one, what's the best that can happen? Number two, what's the worst that can happen? Number three, what's likely to happen? And number four, are you willing to tolerate the worst in order to achieve the best? Well, what's part and parcel of strategy is setting the actual goal. Now, why is that critically important? Because Velton, what gets measured gets done. There is a one-to-one correlation between establishing a goal and the length of the goal. Researchers have proven over and over again that the longer that you project yourself into the future, the greater the chance for success. It's the short-term goals that we dismiss. It's the short-term goals that we wave off. It's the short-term goals that we table because we think that we are capable of attaining them all the time. And a lot of times that isn't true. And all you got to do is read the case study of Google. Here you have Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They come up with Google. And at the time, I mean, there were hundreds of search engines that were on the market that proposed to do what Larry Page and Sergey Brin were doing with Google. What set them apart? Well, number one, they got financing from one of their college professors who was on their doctoral committee. And number two, the Miami Heat basketball team came to the Golden State Warriors to play a game. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin were there. And they got a chance to meet, the head coach, Pat Riley, at the time. And Pat Riley explained to them there's two types of effort. Number one, there's excellent game. And number two, there is game excellence. Huge difference. Now, Velton, anybody can have an excellent game.
Mm-hmm.
Feed the ball to LeBron James. He's unconscious. He can't miss. Man, Michael Jordan is in the zone. He can close his eyes and shoot three-pointers. Steph Curry, he's unstoppable today, man, because he's in his area of excellence. Well, yeah, he's having an excellent game. But there's another form, and it's called game excellence. And what is game excellence? It is practicing that behavior every day that leads up to an excellent game. One of the first interviews I had when Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice was released, Lou Holtz, the head football coach at Notre Dame, they just won the national championship, and he brought me in to speak. And he said to me, I'm talking to him, after blah, 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 we hit it off. He said, there's only one thing better than winning. And I said, what is that, coach? He says, preparing to win. That's what Carla Harris was talking about. Okay, yeah, okay, so, all right, listen, I don't care if you fell short of the mark. If you exceeded, your quota, if you exceeded expectations, that's fine. If you fell short of expectations in your quota, well, in some circumstances, that's fine too. Why? Because you can now set an objective in order to reach that goal. But if you don't sit down at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, I guess that's why it's so important. There's 2 times of the year that I guess I'm really in demand, or I'm really busy. Number 1, the third quarter, and number 2, the first quarter. The third quarter, everybody's wrapping up. The first quarter, everybody's setting new goals and objectives. You can set, a plan, a policy, and procedure for that. But part and parcel, Velton, you got to practice the daily habits that lead to overall success. Number 2, you got to keep your goals in front of you at all times. That's the only reason why Napoleon Hill wrote the original Think and Grow Rich. He tells you within the first 30 pages of this book, I mention a secret. And if you utilize this secret, there isn't anything that you can have, do, or become. Well, what in the world is a secret? According to Napoleon Hill, number 1, decide. You got to make a decision what you want. Suppose you want money. Well, I decided that I'm going to earn $10,000, blah, blah, blah. So number 1, make a decision. Number 2, what are you going to give up in order to get this $10,000? Are you going to give up time? Are you going to give up, are you going to work, study? Are you going to start a business? Blah, blah, blah. Number 3, you got to set a daily plan. How often are you going to do this? Are you going to work 40 hours a week? Are you going to work 80 hours a week? Blah, blah, blah. Number 4, Velton, you got to commit your plan to writing. You got to write this down. Write down your decision, what you're going to give up, your plan. And number 4, you got to write it. Number 5, and this is what he says, number 5, it's the first thing you read in the morning. And number 6, it's the last thing you read at night. That's Napoleon Hill. And that's the only reason why he wrote Think and Grow Rich. To get you to use this 6-part plan. And he said, and where did he get the 6-part plan from? He got it back when he was 24 years old, and Andrew Carnegie was 70 years old in 1908 when he knocked on his door. That's what Andrew Carnegie told Napoleon Hill, and that's what W. Clement Stone told me.
Wow, that's amazing. It's funny because when you say that, your plan, and a lot of people talk about, I want to make more money. I want to make more money. I got to have a plan to make more money. And it kind of leads me into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. It's not about always trying to chase the money, because if you provide more value, the money will come in any business, because people buy value versus buying your product. The product has to have some kind of value to them. So,
and probably the best example of that, all you got to do, Nike brought me in so many times, all you got to do is look at Phil Knight and the Air Jordan brand. When he launched the Air Jordan brand, Phil Knight was consumed with the fact that he wanted a $100 gym shoe. And everybody on his team up in Beaverton, Oregon said, Phil, you're making a huge mistake. You got to be crazy. No one is going to pay $100 for a gym shoe. Why are you so bent on $100? Well, Phil Knight had studied Chanel. And when he studied Chanel, Chanel decided to take their cologne and their perfume, and they were going to break the $100 barrier. Why in the world did Chanel do that? And it was exactly what you said, the value proposition. No one's going to buy a $100 bottle of cologne. No one's going to pay $100, blah, blah, blah. And it was Chanel who really came up with the high-end pricing strategy. Because at that particular time, the overriding presumption attitude is if you raise your prices in anything, you were going to lose customers. Chanel proved, and even Phil Knight proved, no, when you raise your prices, you attract a customer who wants value at that level. Who buys a Rolls Royce? Those people who want to spend $300,000 on a car buy a Rolls Royce. Who buys the $240, LeBron James? Those people who want to spend $240. Who buys the Hermes Birkin handbag that sells for $150,000? Those women who want a $150,000 Hermes handbag that, they can't keep them on the shelf.
Now, here's I think the real trick to that, and I want you to spend a couple seconds talking about this. The value is not what we perceive, but the value is what the prospective customer
Exactly.
sees in the product. And a
Yep.
lot of times we get caught up in what's important to us
Hmm.
because we are the entrepreneur, we are the CEO, we're the decision maker. We want to input our influence into the product we're bringing to the market, but the people that are actually out there that are going to spend the money may not find the same value in
Exactly.
what we're talking about or what we're doing.
And that's a part of branding. And there's 5 elements of branding. Number one, your appearance. Number two, your name. Number three, your attitude. Number four, the content of what you have to say. And number five, I mean, the first 5 words or the first few words out of your mouth. So perception is reality. What you see is what you get. You never know who's looking. You never know who's looking. Your attitude is everything. I mean, why is it cute that McDonald's puts you in a uniform? I don't care if you work for UPS. You think it's cute that they wear those brown uniforms? If you go to Home Depot, why do they give you an orange apron? Because they think it's nice and they want their people to be in uniform? No. The reason why they demand that their employees wear a uniform because they can charge up to 15% more for the product or service. Appearance is everything. And like you said, perception is in the eye of the beholder.
Mm. All right, I'm going to go back and read another passage from your book. I'm reading to adults again. Y'all have to excuse me, but I can't let this go by because
Yeah.
you interviewed one of my favorite people, and that's Colin Powell. And he said this: a large part of every financially successful life must be spent in laying foundation stones of work, perseverance, health, and service to others in order to endure the test of time.
Well, let me clarify a point, man. There's so many folks that I wanted to. I really couldn't get a hold of Colin Powell, but I had to go ahead and use that quote right there. But that is profound what he had to say. I mean, here is a guy. Here is a guy who's a paragon of excellence. And why is he near and dear to my heart? Because he really got his breakthrough right here in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a young lieutenant training for, about to be deployed in Vietnam. And he was based at Fort McPherson right here in the Atlanta area, which is damn near walking distance from where we are right now in the AUC.
Mhm.
But his words resonate and he has so much deep meaning. So much deep meaning.
It's interesting because there's another passage that I love in that area, and it says, "Brave and honest women, men and women, do not work for gold. They
Mhm.
work for love, for
Yep.
honor, for character. Character before wealth."
And see, and you mentioned they work for love. Love is the bottom line. Money is not the bottom line. You love your customers, you're going to get more customers. You love your job, you get in the parking space closer to the building. You love your coworkers, you're going to make, manager in no time. And that's what Bill Gates had to learn from Steve Jobs. They were on a panel together, and Steve Jobs made it known that he only paid himself at the time when he was the head of Apple, he only paid himself $1 a year in salary. And Bill Gates says, Steve, why are you only paying yourself $1 a year? And Steve Jobs tells Bill Gates, he says, I have no desire to be the wealthiest individual in the graveyard. In other words, you can't take the money with you. So you might as well make some use of it right now. And when Bill Gates heard that, he immediately turned to his wife and said, we got to start giving our money away. And that's when he came up with Gates and Millennial Scholars. And that's when he and Warren Buffett came up with that pact to go ahead and give their money away. And here's these guys, they can't even give their money away. Why? Because Bill Gates earns what? $71,000 a second. Hell, by the time he gives away $71,000, there's another $71,000 that he just made. I mean, he can't outrun it.
Right.
But money is the bottom line. I mean, as Mary Baker already says, divine love has met and will always meet every human need. And that's what we got to get back to, Velton. I mean, there's no financial deficit in this country. There's no financial deficit in the world. There's a spiritual deficit. I mean, come on, man. I mean, take your eye off yourself and put it on that. That's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs solve problems. I ask my students all the time, man, if I gave you $1 million, what problem you would solve? If I gave
Move
you
the
a
mic a little
billion,
bit there.
yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah. I said, there's a spiritual deficit. I asked my students, I said, if I gave you $1 million, what problem would you solve? If I gave you $1 billion, what problem would you solve? And in the wealth choice, from my research, I saw people will make you rich, people will make you poor, depending on your level of service. And service, that's all it is. Service is love. But it begins with you as an individual. That's what they teach you at Harvard Business School. They teach you at Harvard Business School, entrepreneurs, don't you dare go into a business unless it has at least $100 million market cap. I don't care what type of business it is, man, because it's going to take a Herculean effort for you to get that business off the ground. Number two, don't start a business unless you can see yourself in this business 20 years from now. In other words, 20 years from now, will you still have the same love? 20 years from now, will you still have the same passion? All right, you got 350 professors here at Clark and Lamb. I told you, Velton, I'm a Tuesday, Thursday guy. The reason why I'm in a suit, I had class today. I'll be back in the suit Thursday. But I'll be on campus tomorrow, and I was on campus Monday. And sometimes I come up here on Friday, and my daughter say, "Dad, man, you're the only professor I know who goes up on campus, when you don't have class." And I tell my daughters, I said, "Well, this is the profession I chose. I chose to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I chose to be engaged at this level. There's 50 million things that I could do, and this is what I wanted to do based out of the pure love that I wanted to do this. So I never look at the clock. I'm never forced at the clock. I'm never wringing the hands. I'm never, man, I got to get out of here. When I go home tonight, I'm going to have a briefcase full of papers that I'm going to grade while watching the baseball game tonight. I mean, it doesn't stop. Now, what is the
Mm.
benefit of that? All right, so I've been here 20 years. 3 times I've been professor of the year at this school. I've won a number of awards. The National Black MBA, I got the Naylor Fitzhugh Award, number one African American professor in the country. I mean, when you are the best, when you are completely and totally engaged, you see, that's called commitment. And why is that critical, Velton? Because the passionate, committed mind can never be defeated.
Wow, that's amazing. You talk about mindset, and I want you to spend a couple of minutes talking about this. A lot of times when we're coming up the ladder, our focus, when we're in corporate America or when we're in some of the more menial tasks or menial jobs, our focus is on wages, what we're getting paid, and what people are telling us our value is. But as a CEO, we should be more inclined and interested in profit
Mm-hmm.
versus wages. As a father, a husband, a head of household, we should be more interested in profit versus wages or wealth, because profit and wealth are almost synonymous in a lot of respects, if I understand that correctly. So,
And even at the micro level, microeconomic level, again, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep. It's not what you make. Okay, it's what you keep. I mean, it's not the assets minus liabilities equal your net worth, and until we look at it at the micro level, you know, and that's really a sore point, for African Americans, and a lot of that, Belton, isn't our fault. A lot of it, I mean, okay, let's go back, and I can tell you from a historical standpoint. I've been studying wealth my entire academic career. And for more than 200 years in this country, close to 250 years in this country, the quickest way to wealth in this country was buying, owning, and trading your first slave. So, I mean, you look at it, Belton. I mean, let's go back to the 1700s and you find a little shack down in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and you have a newlywed white couple, and they wait till the evening and they wait till it gets dark. And when no one's looking, they make sure that no one's looking, and they go in their secret place and they bring out a mason jar. And in this mason jar, they got pennies, they got nickels, they got dimes, and they got quarters. And they do this routine every night. And they empty the mason jar on the table and they count their pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. And the husband tells the wife, "We keep saving at this level. and we'll be able to buy our first slave. And maybe 3 years after we buy our first slave, we might be able to go ahead and get Mandinka. It's Mandinka. They couldn't say Mandinka because they're Mandinka. And she says, now, come on, man, level with me. We'll never be able to get Mandinka. They cost $3,000 minimum. Man. No, we keep on at this level. That's what transpired in this country. For 250 years, you had more millionaires in this country in the Mississippi Valley area, from Southern Virginia all the way through Louisiana down to East Texas, than you had any place else in this country.
Mm.
So that's what we had to deal with. So I'm not going to poo-poo what we have done. Now, I can go ahead and give you all the data, and I can tell you exactly where we are as a race. 27% of African Americans spend more on a weekly basis than what they bring in. More than 35% of African Americans don't even have a savings plan. More than 40% of African Americans, are non-bank, don't even use a reputable bank for their financial transactions. The number one bank of Black America is Walmart. Number two is the post office. So I know where we are. But you talked about it. Until we change our mindset, until we look at it from the opposite end and look at wealth creation rather than paying out. You know, I mean, that to me, that is really the lodestar, and that's where we got to be in terms of, when we look at our goals and objectives, Velton, it's like a footstool, and the footstool has three legs on it, and these are the legs. Number one, wealth creation. Number two, entrepreneurship, and number three, restoration of the Black male.
It's interesting because that kind of, I was reading and going back to the book, the seventh law of wealth, which is make thy money grow.
Yep.
And what it really made me think about, we are a lot of times, especially my generation, we talk about we started behind the eight ball versus some of our white counterparts. Their parents had things and were able to provide for them things that our parents were not able to provide for.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we are in a different situation in a lot of respects, and many of us have gone through the ranks of corporate America, we've aspired and we've arrived at higher levels of position in companies, or we're CEOs of our own companies and entrepreneurs, we have an obligation to leave a legacy so that our children don't have to go through the same thing that our generation or the generation before us had to go through. What do you think about that, and how do we change our mindset so that we are thinking that way to make our money grow, not just for ourselves, but for future generations?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that is when I started looking at these, Black millionaires in focus groups and look at their buying behavior and their mindset regarding wealth, and I had 6 focus groups around the country. Make that money grow. Yeah, I had 6 focus groups around the country. And I started the book in the Raleigh Durham area. You talked about the Black Wall Street. And it was so apropos. I surveyed about 45 Black millionaires in the Raleigh Durham area. And from Raleigh Durham, I went to Washington, D.C. I had a focus group in Washington, D.C., and there were about 110 Black millionaires in that focus group. And I had 3 focus groups in Atlanta, and in one of the focus groups in Atlanta, Coca-Cola set it up for me. Had the McDonald's Black owner operators, and there were more than 300 Black millionaires in that focus group. And I had a focus group in Omaha, Nebraska. I can't remember how many were in
The
that
Big
focus.
Island.
Yeah. And then last but not least, I had a small focus group with just women out in Las Vegas. Now, why was that critically important? Because I got a chance to see that they interact with each other, interact with their peer group. You know, so many times there are 5 different buying emotions, and you can always tell when a marketeer, Belton, is pursuing, is using a buying emotion to go ahead and lure African Americans in. What is the number one buying emotion that lures Black Americans in? It's recognition. You know, we have been kicked to the curb as a race for so long. We hunger for recognition. That's why we love social media more than any other group. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on this, that. Recognize, look at me. Everything is look at me. And how can you tell when a marketeer is going after Black America and using recognition? Just close your eyes and listen to the words. Be the envy of your neighborhood. Be the first on your block to buy. For the next 5 callers, man, they're going after, Rhythm Nation, going after Black America. Well, that runs counter to what I saw with Black Millionaires. I mean, there's no beating on the chest. There is no look at me. Now, they might wear the top designer fashions, particularly the women. They might wear the St. John's outfit. They may wear the bling bling, but they don't wear it out in public. They only wear it in a type of setting where their group, where their peers, are presented. None of that. So from there, I came up with the calculus of compensation. And I took about 9 or 10 variables, and I explained how the have-not views it and how the have views it. And when it came down to money and when it came to wealth, the have-not to spend it, to consume it, the have, the wealth creator, to save, to invest, to create generational wealth, to make it easy for this and future generations. And really, that's the hallmark of really why we're here. That's the number one reason why we're here. I mean, if we don't solve this Rubik's Cube, we will forever being like Sisyphus, Greek mythology, rolling that boulder up the hill to constantly fall down on us. Now, there are some factors that go into that. Again, there's racism, discrimination, there's all types of isms, even redlining still exists. Velton, every burden that was heaped on the back of Black America came from the federal government. And arguably, the largest outside of slavery had to be redlining. I mean, redlining began in the 1930s when you had a group of bankers. They had a map of a local SMSA metropolitan area, and they said, gentlemen, under no circumstances will we invest the dime, will we support anybody economically in this area. And to drive the point home, hand me that red marker. And they drew a red outline of the Black community. And furthermore, they went to say, even if we do find a young Black couple whose finances are in order and they have the money for a down payment for a home, yes, we will give them a mortgage, but we will charge them double. Now, supposedly, redlining was outlawed in the late 70s, early 80s. But I disagree. You still got redlining today. Why?
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is the only advanced country in the world, Velton, the United States of America, that the quality of elementary and high school education is predicated upon home values. So here you are in the Atlanta area. There is no way that a kid who goes to Carver Homes is going to receive the same quality education of a child going to Johns Creek, Stockbridge, Eagles Landing, Gwinnett. And the same thing is across the country. Now, the kid who really needs that education, who doesn't have that mother or the father, who doesn't talk about wealth at the kitchen table, is the kid who goes to Carver Homes. He's the one who really needs a quality education. And we never get it. And here's the thing, Velton. No one says a thing. No one says a thing. That's why I got to offer a paid political announcement. We don't have a choice. We got to elect that sister, Stacey Abrams, and we got to get that brother up in Tallahassee go ahead, or we will forever be in the dark ages. We will forever be in the dark ages. You look somebody like, hey, man, I don't know anything about this guy's past or whatever, and I don't want to throw anything out there. But when he was growing up, how many times do you think he heard the N-word at his kitchen table when he was growing up? Come on, man. Come on, connect the damn dots, brother. Go ahead and once we put her in office, she will become a global icon. And the rest of the world will turn to Stacey Abrams and the people of Georgia and ask one question. And that question will be, what the hell took you so long?
You know, it's interesting because the theme of the Black CEO Network is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And through collaboration, we have an opportunity to make things happen and make a change. And if there's a message that you'd like to share with the Black CEO community, these are the virtual CEOs, but the majority of us are of African American descent. We are not exclusive,
Mm-hmm.
but we have a mission, and
Yep.
our mission has to be one of collaboration towards a specific goal. And the
Yep.
goal is to raise our community. And one of the philosophies that I have that everybody in America needs to understand, when we raise our community, we raise our country,
Yep.
because our country will benefit from the the contributions of the geniuses in our community. I spoke to some young brothers a couple of months ago when I went into a detention center. And a lot of them were there because they were there for selling drugs. And a lot of them were the leaders in their community. These young men were geniuses. They had built corporations.
Yep.
They were illegal corporations, but they had built corporations. That means they have genius potential. It just was illegal genius potential. If
Yep.
we could turn that energy into something legal and positive, how much further could we go?
Without a doubt. I mean, and again, it goes back to um, not only nurturing the next generation, but finding out, where the game changers are and where are the disruptors, and really making a difference in our community.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest mistake that you'll ever make, Velton, is to think that somebody pays you, or your your existence is off somebody else's paycheck. That's not true. You are CEO of your own personal life, and you sign your own paycheck. You are president of your own corporation. And if I can leave folks with just one word, I mean, it goes back to the interview that I had with TD Jakes, and you heard me say this. I mean, TD Jakes told me, the keys to the kingdom can be found in that old diatribe. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But Jakes took it one step further. He said, but show him or her how they can buy the pond, and no one in their family will ever know struggle. There's enough information out here for us today to buy the pond. I mean, if you don't want to get a copy of the Wealth Choice, and I'm not here paid political announcement pushing my own book, but these are your wealth creators over a 7-year period. And I didn't do anything special. I just sat in the corner, I interviewed them, and I took notes with both hands. And this is what they told me, and I put it in a book. I mean, that's part of the problem right there. I mean, if you came to my study here in the Atlanta area and I gave you the remote control to my flat screen TV, and you cut on one of the financial networks, you might find Steve Jobs being interviewed. You might find an old interview with Warren Buffett, Howard Schultz of Starbucks, Phil Knight of Nike Shoe. But when's the last time you've seen one of your wealth creators being interviewed on TV? When is the last time you heard from them how they made it and how they did it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so critically important. And what you're doing, offering me and other folks an audience for our voice and giving us a forum to get that message out. And I'm eternally grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you spending the time that you spent with me today. Um, you know, the it's always a pleasure when I have an opportunity to spend some time with you. I do have to leave you with a couple of things, though. Number one, save 2 more books because I need to buy one for my wife. I mean, for one for my son and one for my daughter. My son lives in Virginia now, but I want him to have a copy of the book, and he can't have
No
mine.
problem.
And I got my daughter here, but I'm not going to get them from you till I see you because I want you to sign them for them.
I'll
But
be
I
on.
know I'm going to see you very soon. What's on the horizon for you in the coming months? I know that we're going to be together in December in Atlanta.
Mhm.
What else is going on, and where can people come out and hear what you have to say?
Well, first and foremost, if you want to hit me up, you can go to my website, DennisKimbro.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. I'm on Instagram. In terms of where will I be next, I have a presentation coming up in Dallas, Texas with Delta Sigma Theta with Vashti McKenzie. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm at, oh man, just a number of places. I got to go look up my schedule, but hit me up on Facebook or Instagram, and I can tell you exactly where I'll be. But as my students tell you, I never ever miss class. So come sit in my class Tuesday or Thursday here at Clark Atlanta.
Fantastic. By the way, I sent you an invitation to you on Facebook to join the Virtual CEO Society. We'd love to have you in our network and in our group. And
Count me
again,
in, my brother.
Doctor, thank you so much. Dennis, it's always a pleasure. I really enjoyed the time we spent together, and I look forward to the opportunity to talk to you again in the not so distant future. Won't be a year this time because we're going to spend more time together.
Praise
And
God.
the other thing is, I'm going to be interviewing you. So
Oh,
get
okay.
ready. All right. I've
Okay.
got a book coming out the first quarter of next year, and I want to interview you for it.
Hey, I'll be honored, man. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
My pleasure. Thanks again.
Okay,
God
take
bless.
care.
Take care. Talk to you soon.
Mhm.